feel like Kobe in the fourth quarter.
This is the Dane Moore NBA podcast coming at you Tuesday afternoon. It's October 3rd. And on today's show, we are going to preview the bigs position. Britt and I have done this for the past couple of years where we kind of split it up: bigs, wings, guards, and kind of do an episode on each of those. Britt, I know we haven't really had the chance to talk since Media Day, so we'll probably mix in some other thoughts and such here too. But generally speaking, we're going to focus on the bigs. The 5 players I put in the big bin are Rudy Gobert, Karl-Anthony Towns, Naz Reid, Luka, Garza, and Leonard Miller. Initially, I had Kyle Anderson on that list. I don't really know what position Kyle Anderson plays anymore. And also, there was plenty of bigs. So I decided to push him over into the wings bin, but I'm sure he'll come up in this as well. Does that sound good to you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's start with Gobert. Me and Chris talked a little bit about Cat and Ant kind of specifically together, and we'll get into Cat some too, but I found myself today more so thinking about Gobert, how he fits, and, you know, it's going to be a little bit different on both sides of the ball. Let's start offensively, on the offensive side of the floor. What are you looking for from Rudy offensively, individually, and or of the group around Rudy to empower him or to be more effective offensively this season?
Well, in terms of Rudy specifically, I'm looking at flexibility. I have my doubts, but I believe, first of all, I believe Finch when he told me in the interview I just did with him recently that this season will be as much about Rudy adapting to the Wolves' way of doing things as last year was about the Wolves adapting to Rudy's way of doing things. Let's see if that happens. One of the 2 things Finch mentioned specifically was that Rudy has a tendency to constantly see offense in terms of spread pick and roll, with him being the initiating screener whenever there's any secondary, third, fourth action. Also kind of looking that way in terms of transition, being a trailer rather than a rim runner. Finch wants to mix that up some. He wants to put him in the dunker spot more often. Makes total sense. Finch also wants to have Rudy play in a manner that gives Cat space when Cat needs to have space to do what he does, depending on matchups, how Cat's feeling, how the team is flowing, all that stuff. I am not positive that will be a smooth and eager transition, and that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for how much, 2 things, whether Gobert buys in mentally and whether Gobert buys in muscle memory, whatever you want to call it, 9 years of habits. So those are the 2 things I'm looking at this season, at least early in the early stages.
To the first part of that, when you were talking about Finch and specifically Rudy and ball screen action, do you take that to mean that Rudy will be running pick and roll as the screener roll man less this season?
I take it to mean that the offense will diversify to the point where Rudy will hang out by the baseline more often than he did last season. And I also am not sure, quite frankly. It's hard to know how much pick and roll rolling Rudy will do with Cat on the floor. Without Cat on the floor and with Slow-Mo as the 4, then that was a natural option. And also, Rudy wasn't necessarily in the dunker spot, but Rudy played more front of the rim dunker with Slow-Mo than I can imagine him doing with Cat.
So this is going to be a little bit of a complicated screen share here, so I'll try to explain it.
Okay.
So you see right here, Rudy as a pick and roll man last season was 17.7% of his total possessions, which was a far cry from the Utah the year before, which was, updating here, was 27.2% of his possessions. And if you go, that was kind of the bad year with Utah where they were kind of falling off. If you go to their best season, the year before that, the 2020-21 season, they went 52-20. They have the number 3 offense, the number 1 defense in the league. Rudy's pick and roll man frequency is 31.8%.
Of his frequency.
Of his total possessions.
Right, exactly.
So really good year, 2021. About 32% of his possessions are pick and roll man. He's getting it on the roll. He's looking to finish. Maybe turns it over, whatever it might be. Though that it's all including that.
Do your numbers have volume as well as percentage?
That's the frequency. So it's like it's hard because one of those was a COVID season and one of them was last season. So the point is from the 2021 season, his frequency of running pick and roll as the roll man and getting the ball cut in half last season with Minnesota. And I get if you want to have a little bit of a different style of play, but if you look at some of these numbers, what his possessions were then replaced with in terms of his frequency was post-ups and cuts. Right. And cuts can be good. I think that's kind of where him and Cat get going together a little bit. But the post-ups, if you look at the two in that, again, with the Utah season, it was less than 3%. It was 10% last year with the Wolves. And we just know that those aren't anywhere near as productive as the pick and roll possessions for him individually or as, as the group. So I get there needs to be these accommodations for Ant to have a clear path to the rim. And, Rudy needs to operate in the dunker spot. And, Cat needs his space to do these things too. Well, I would contend that Rudy also needs to boost that frequency of when he has the ball, when he's being used. It is as a pick and roll man more often than it was last season. So I'm interested to see how that all comes together. I know that's kind of easier said than done, but I do think it's really important to not forget that should be a priority within the offense as well. Otherwise, the trade-off is more broken possessions where Rudy is getting post-ups and some of those sort of, or at least that's what happened last season.
I'll push back in a couple of ways on that.
Cool.
First of all, I think that we don't know total numbers versus frequency. In other words, if it's 35% of 1,000, that's a lot. Okay. If it's 35% of 200 versus 15% of, 200, 300, then it's kind of the same number. You get what I mean? It's all in the usage to some extent. I would also argue that what I think Finch is interested in and what I personally think is a good idea, those cuts will actually be dunker spot lobs.
Sure, that'd be great.
Counts as a cut. And also, I think Gobert has enough historical gravity as a roll man that you don't have to hit him on the roll on pick and rolls. That can be an action that stimulates all kinds of stuff that can happen, whether it's Cat in the corner, Ant on the weak side, somebody else in the slot, whatever. Also, I do think that there are times when Gobert just sets the screen and it becomes a screen play, even if Gobert is rolling. So I guess what I'm saying is I look at this team, I look at Finch saying there just isn't enough room. As good as Jaden McDaniels was offensively last year, there just isn't enough set plays for him. Well, all right, if there's not enough set plays for Jaden McDaniels, I saw what Gobert was like on the rolls last year. I saw what Gobert was like on cuts last year. I don't think he's bad by any means because we're talking rolls, cuts, and putbacks.
Profitable
Those are all very, very high percentage shots. So I'm not going to begrudge him that, but I'm also not saying that Gobert will be nearly as important to this offense as he was to Utah's offense. And I think those Utah numbers are not aspirational to me if I'm looking at the Wolves getting together the best offense that they can get together.
Right. Yeah, I think we're in ways kind of saying the same thing. I would in general like Rudy's overall offensive usage to probably go down, right?
Exactly.
But within that context, let's make, you know, a higher percentage of the possessions when Rudy is being used to be on the roll in pick and roll and the cuts, not the post ups, not the off the dribble from 12 feet sort of thing.
Couldn't agree with you more about the post ups. I think that post ups involve lateral foot movement and hand action at the same time.
Yep.
And without criticizing Rudy's athleticism or coordination, I just think we've seen enough of that to know that that's not his best move.
Sure.
And so, on the other hand, when Finch talked about this, and I visualized it a lot better under this context, I think Ant will be a far better partner for Rudy on lobs and dunker spot moves as Ant goes to the rim than they are on straight pick and roll. Mike Conley, absolutely. And if you want to run Mike Conley, Gobert pick and rolls until the cows come home because the defense isn't recognizing how two masters of the form do it, then by all means.
And I should say that those numbers are including the whole season. You know, 65% of which was with D'Lo, 35% which with Conley. I don't have that split up.
Sure.
But I think we both would acknowledge it was significantly higher, a better distribution of Gobert possessions after that time. So naturally, some of that's just going to come in from a different roster.
Two players, actually three players, quite frankly, have really good net ratings and offensive ratings at the same time, numbers with Gobert. And they are Mike Conley, Kyle Anderson, and Jaden McDaniels. And so, therefore, what do those three people have in common? They all are deliberate with their passing. Okay. They are also prone to be pass-first players. Even Jaden, to some extent, has a real fundamental playground game where he can be an assist guy. And so when you got guys like Cat and Ant doing it, I think there's a little bit more mustard in play. There's a little bit more showmanship in play. Not because, I'm a guy who likes to throw words around when I write. That everybody has a different style of how they do things. And it isn't that it's wrong. It's just that Gobert can handle a lot of complexity on pass catch, mechanisms.
Yeah, like Miss Lippy's 6th grade class probably isn't going to be able to read and comprehend a Britt Robson column, but a group like a 50-year-old man book club would be able to. Yeah,
also to your point, a really, really smart 6th grader isn't necessarily even going to get that wordplay. But if you're giving him the lesson, he's going to absorb that really fast and deliver. He's going to get the lesson better. Even the smart people in your cohort there are going to benefit from something at their level for the most part. And so it isn't necessarily Gobert's fault. He is what he is, but he is somebody that needs to see the ball on the catch, and he needs to be in the proper position. He can't be moving toward the basket in an uncoordinated way. He can't shoot off his wrong foot. He can't suddenly encounter a lot of initial turbulence in the action. It has to be clean. And that's why, again, if it's in flow and if the defense is giving you that, then I think you ought to go with that. I think there's just a better chance of not only getting Cat and Ant off with space, but also running clean plays when you can use Gobert out of the dunker spot, provided, and this is where I started from, he is in on it. He really feels like, this is what I want to do. I don't want to set a pick on the third action of the possession. It's time for me to go down and either get the offensive rebound or just my presence down there creates a lane, and then maybe I'll get a dunk.
Can I show you a type of play that I think is a perfect compromise of this. And
Yes.
I've just noticed watching France these past 2 seasons, I started watching France after the Wolves got Gobert. I love these. I don't know. I wrote down pick, roll, swing, feed possessions.
Okay, cool.
And they run it. They do it all the time. And this is literally the first play of the World Cup. This is what they do. And I'll try for those people listening at home, not seeing this on the screen, explain it. It's a screen. Rudy rolls, passes it, and then you feed Gobert. Now, this one's a little bit of a post up. It's the first possession of the time. But, it works. He gets a smaller body on him there. They run the pick and roll. So here we go again. This is going to be another possession. He's being guarded by Vucevic here. Runs a screen and roll with Fournier. Fournier can't find him. Fournier is looking. And then there's another screen here. He swings it to Batum. Again, feed.
Right.
That, and I can so see this with Ant being Fournier, right? Cat or Kyle Anderson being Nicholas Batum, and then Rudy rolling down there. There's a third play. It's the
you
same
take
sort
away what I like about that is you take away the 2-man action, and you divert, especially if you have a threat like Fournier or Cat or Ant out there. You have to go guard him. You can't be doubling Rudy in the low block if you have all of a sudden the ball swung out to a 3-point shooter at the top of the break. So that makes a lot of sense to me. What's funny about that is it's kind of a post-up, which we just got through saying we shouldn't do for him.
But that's the thing is like there are these situational catches. Like this is the best one right there. That's like basically the dunker spot. It's again, just having watched France, and that's my most recent Rudy Gobert memory in my mind is just this a little bit additional level of patience in Ant or we can call it Conley, who's ever initiating it. It's like it might not be there in the first roll, and that's okay. Maybe Rudy's going to come up and set it again, and maybe it's still not there. Swing it, but you've already got the switch. You've got a smaller player on him. I mean, the reason France runs that as much as I do is because it's so easy to catch Rudy on like a 6'6" guy in Euro basketball.
Exactly. Go ahead.
That's going to happen in the NBA too. If they're putting 2 on Ant, if they're prioritizing Cat, there is going to be ample possessions throughout this season where Rudy has a 6'6" guy on him. And is it a straight post up? No, you don't want that. Like, get out of that. That's why I put those in there. That first one, too slow. But it got better through those 3 clips where it's like Rudy acting quicker and quicker off of that. And hopefully it can just be a grab, spin to the basket. And maybe it doesn't even need to be any post move. It's just straight lob.
It's kind of a hybrid. It's a hybrid of a post up and a dunker spot.
Yes, that's what you were explaining it. I'm like, okay, I actually clipped these clips. This is kind of perfect.
Because I really do think that in that particular instance, you're getting what Finch wants, which is Rudy at the rim without a lot of muss and fuss, and hopefully single covered, and also the ball up in the air so that he doesn't have to bring it down, all that stuff. Again, what I would emphasize if we're talking about Rudy Gobert as a scoring option is don't have any mess. It needs to be clean. The pass needs to be clean. The positioning needs to be clean. The finish needs to be clean, because there's not a lot of room for error if any kind of physical adjustment is required.
You know what cleans up all that stuff better than anything else, Britt? Structure.
Structure
and I know people
great
are like,
3-point shooting. Right.
Yeah. And it's like, again, they don't need to be the Utah Jazz, but a little bit more towards the structure side, and you're going to get more of this out of Rudy. I don't think structure is the best type of game for Ant to play or Karl to play, or maybe even Mike Conley to play. I don't. But so long as you have Rudy Gobert in the mix as a main cog in your thing to get him to be productive as an individual scorer or just as a screener to open things up, it's going to come best through structure. And I think that's going to be further in the mix.
All right. And that I agree with you on everything you just said. Here is my concern. My concern is Rudy Gobert has done things the same way for 9 years, and he's been very successful at it. If they begin to do the things that Rudy Gobert has been successful at for 9 years, and they have a better idea of how to do that, then he is not going to want to audible. He is not going to want to stay in the dunker spot. He is not going to want to do some of the things you need to create space. What I worry about is, I noticed Rudy is a creature of habit, very, very much a creature of habit. When he thought he was open all throughout the season, he let his teammates know about it and everybody in the stands. And when he did not get the ball, there was some body language reactions. I worry about Rudy Gobert being a full-fledged give back what you get in a half-court offense. If he can do that, if he can say, all right, I'm 4 for 6 and we're not even at halftime yet, it's time for me to do this because they're adjusting to me, then I will applaud everything you just said. Again, though, I keep thinking of the other 4 people on the floor, and I will tell you, as good as a finisher, as good as you can put somebody like Gobert in high leverage situations, it remains less ideal than somebody who is a little bit more athletic than he is at it, and more ideal if somebody isn't fixated on thinking that's what's in my bag and I don't need anything else.
I just think, Britt, like, the thing that needs to come out or be deleted is that the body language of that, right? I didn't get it, I'm upset. I don't agree with the idea that if you play him in a different way and you ask him to be even more conspicuous in the dunker and out of the mix even more, I don't think you delete the body language and the frustration. Why would that go away?
It won't, but other people will flourish.
Okay, so that's the opportunity cost. And those are the things we're picking through. I don't disagree with any of that. I just wanted to lay that all out there.
Yeah, I'm not saying that Rudy Gobert's buy-in. It has to be a balance, and again,
which is what it sounds like the coaching staff is doing by saying we want to have structure and then play and flow out of the structure. They're trying to
and play and flow out of the structure, meaning not always pick and roll as the second, third, fourth result with Rudy. Let's see that. Mm-hmm. Again, part of it, I think I'm biased because just before they left, the last day, Sunday at practice, before they got on a plane, Chris, John, and I got Rudy after practice. And on defense, he was still talking. There was a great determination for Rudy to say things will work great if we just do if we just clean up what we didn't clean up last year. And I know what he's thinking about. At least I think I do. I'd be happy to be wrong about this. Mm-hmm. But I feel like Rudy is thinking, we just didn't get enough time for my teammates to learn what I can do. And once that happens with all the personnel, then we're going to be fine. And I don't blame him. The guy had an entire franchise built around him for as long as he did. And he's got to be feeling France didn't do as well in this World Cup. He had statistically one of his worst seasons since like his third or fourth season in the league. And he's reads social media as well as everybody else. There's a lot of he would not be normal human being if he didn't feel the need to administer some payback on the blemishes to his reputation this year. I just hope that what happens during all this is that the kind of more team-oriented offense that Finch is envisioning comes to fruition, given what you have advocated for Rudy, but also given what Finch has advocated that isn't that.
And that's why whatever this balance is going to come to define this season, I think, as
definitely
much
part of it.
as,
Definitely part of it.
Yeah, I think as much as anything, because it's not just stylistic, it's also mental and personality and how all of those things mixed together. I think we can move into Karl in a
Sure.
way of also talking about Rudy and defense. Those things are kind of synonymous, at least on that side of the floor. But first, today's show was brought to you by Falling Knife Brewing Company. I've been reminding all of you that on October 14th, starting at 4 p.m., Britt, myself, and others will kind of be doing, or Falling Knife is going to be doing a Wolves Brewery sort of takeover. We're going to be there hanging out. Britt and I are going to do a live show at 5. The Wolves play the Knicks at 6:30. We'll hang around to watch that game. Again, like I mentioned yesterday, there's going to be Rectangle Pizza for the food truck. There's going to be Wolves merch there. We're going to be doing giveaways, some tickets, some of that merch, probably some drinks, pizza specials, all those sort of things. Just want to, again, remind you while I got Britt here that it is Saturday, October 14th, the day of the Wolves' first preseason game back in the States. Come at 4 o'clock. Hopefully we'll be able to hang out outside, do a live show at 5, and then watch the game at 6:30. Again, that's Falling Knife Brewing Company, and it's just in Northeast Minneapolis. We'd love to see as many of you as we can right before the season starts there. So again, October 14th, 4 p.m.
And even if it's a preseason game, but Madison Square Garden, even if it's middle of October, Cat will be amped.
I hadn't thought about that. That's a good call.
And Ant, of course, it's Madison Square Garden, and there'll be people coming out. You know, obviously the fan base in New York is very excited about what the Knicks have done. But I do think that there will be a little bit more to it than, like a game in Sioux Falls, like as happened, occasionally in the preseason. I think Madison Square Garden is always a draw, and it's a hallowed place among hoopsters. And I think there are players on the Wolves that appreciate that. And also it'll be, give you a chance. Who knows how many minutes they'll play, but it'd be fun to see the way Julius Randle gets defended. Will it be Jaden McDaniels, or will it be, a little bit of gnaw, a little bit of slow-mo, a little bit of zone, whatever. So who knows?
Nate revenge game.
That's right. He may see the floor, and we know he's got a temper, right?
I bet he will. All right, Brett, let's move over to Cat, and kind of fuse this together with, we didn't get a lot into defense with Rudy. I'll kind of pose, I guess, the same question of what are your eyes going to be trained on with Cat as on the defensive side of the floor this season, early on, whether it's preseason, but maybe even more so the first, 5-10 games of the regular season?
How well the Wolves can scheme Cat into being in confidence-inducing situations. Mm-hmm. I think, again, mental attitude is very important here as well. What is crazy is that Cat's numbers with Rudy on defense were a lot better than the eye test. The eye test looked like they were not in sync at all. They did not play that badly together, given what the actual results are.
Yeah, it's just that the defensive number was like 103 or whatever, and the offensive number was that too. Elite defense, terrible offense.
If we're talking defense, though, I mean, it is interesting that I do think that.
I just wanted to say they didn't win those minutes by like a lot.
Yeah, no.
They played elite defense and still about pushed the minutes.
Right, which, think back to everything I just said before about leaning into Rudy at different places. But one of the things that's really making me hopeful is that Mike Conley is twice the defender D'Lo Russell is in different circumstances. In terms of mental commitment and physical experience, wisdom, whatever you want to call it, Ant is going to be, needing to get more discipline, especially off ball. Well, a lot of that has to do with the fact that I think the Wolves are going to play a lot of either Rudy in a straight drop or Rudy up and then dropping. How Cat deals with the latter, how Cat deals with Rudy up and then dropping, whether they can be in sync enough to know when Rudy drops, what happens before Rudy drops, whether or not Cat is in the slot and needs to be rotating out, whether they can invert after that happens. All of those things, we have enough. We have more eye test and sample knowledge than the coaching staff does, because we've seen Cat for a long, long time now. And we know, I think it would be pretty clear cut to say that by far the best defense Cat has ever played was the year the first year they went to the playoffs under
2021,
Finch.
22.
Yeah. Where they played almost exclusively high wall when they needed their best defense. And that Cat surprised us all by being remarkably good at
playing up,
at short quickness burst decision making away from the rim, but not out on the perimeter. I mean, Cat in it, stopping the short mid range, or at the very least being in that scrum, was remarkably capable compared to what I expected from him. That isn't necessarily a place that is an advantage when your partner is Rudy Gobert, because Rudy expects
not going to be asked to do that.
Rudy expects to handle all of that stuff, and will kind of take it personally if somebody isn't doing their job and tries to do it for him. So, all right, you take away one of the things Cat does best on defense. How do you structure your schemes so that Cat gets confidence? Maybe it's in perimeter rotation, but maybe it's a limited perimeter rotation. And once he's switched once or rotated once, there are adjustments. They get more aggressive on the other side or whatever.
I mean, the goal has to be to have Karl be there as the secondary rim protector. That's the ideal situation on every possession.
But offenses are going to try to play their way out of that too. So then I think the goal is have Cat be somebody who isn't very late or very out of position. Whether it's, and so what does that look like? You know, that means that Jaden McDaniels becomes a really good rim protector anyway, and is your, you know, maybe fulfills that spot. Well, all of a sudden Cat's, you know, maybe on that man, or maybe Conley has him. But the point being that Cat has to defend quality shooters in space. How do you make that less embarrassing a circumstance? Both in terms of Karl's mental momentum and in terms of the way the Wolves feel about themselves in defense. Because I think the biggest danger to Cat and Rudy remaining on the floor at the same time is Cat being exposed on defense often enough that they just feel like it's just better to stagger him. You know, let's give them 12 minutes together tops, and, you know, or whatever, you know. But I think that
I mean, that is just such an indictment of the whole thing. Like they need to, and I agree. It's maybe gonna go there, but like you have to, if you're Chris Finch and Tim Connolly or whatever, you have aspirations still of making this work. Like that degree of stagger, you gotta wait a while to get there.
Right,
I mean,
let's say 16 minutes. But even then, what I'm saying is, not only does that an admission of failure on your blockbuster trade, but the Naz signing, the non-signing of Slow-Mo, you know, I guess you can't extend them immediately, but the point being, the way you've structured your front court for the future is to lean into two bigs on the floor almost always at the same time. Well, that has to be solved. And guess what? Naz has the same, if not more, problems on defense in a Gobert-centric defensive scheme than Cat does. So you're looking at some significant issues with how you can play your four. And Finch is fond of saying it's the most defensively flexible guarding position on the floor because there's so many different types of fours. But all that means is that most opponents have that in their quiver and can pull it out. If you want to play Naz or Cat in rotation, if they could get Naz and Cat in rotation and then start moving the ball, you know, I mean, we talked about this last year. Same thing. What would the Clippers do with all of their size and 3-point shooting or whatever? I mean, it remains. There's so many teams now. I mean, the Lakers, Utah. So you know, even people who don't have size like the Pels will. I mean the Pels. I meant the Thunder. But people who can put the 4 in rotation.
Right.
Again. That's what I'm looking for when you ask me what I want to see. I want to see a structure work. And Finch mentioned that, you know, one of the ways to do that is when you are in trouble a little bit with that rotation, that you get more aggressive and you hurry the decision making. It's a little bit of a gamble, but it still gives you that fly around a little bit, which is, you know, something I'm interested in. And you got, like I said, Mike Conley, I think, is brighter. I think having Nikhil on the team for the entire season, as well as Conley on the team for the entire season, gives you a lot more quickness and want to at that end of the floor. I think there are ways where, even if it isn't ideal schematically, it can be more than sufficient if you get good at covering it up, that weakness.
So this is how I think of it, and this is just your basic high pick and roll. Let's the Wolves 5 starters are on the floor. Jaden's guarding the ball.
Yep.
Rudy's guarding the screener. Ant is in the left corner, guarding the guy in the corner there. Karl's in the right corner, guarding the stretch 4 there.
Right.
And Mike Conley's guarding the guard on the strong side right above where Karl and the corner guy are, right?
Okay.
The good thing about Rudy is you can defend that pick and roll action with 2 guys, right? We used to talk all the time back in the Saunders day about tagging, right? That would be Mike Conley needing to come in to tag the roller. Well, the great thing about Rudy is he's kind of got that, you know, no tag. We're going to guard this pick and roll with 2. So Mike can stay up there right above the break, and Karl can be in the right corner guarding his man. Now, what those guys are going to do is they're going to interchange. Is the guy that Mike's guarding the guy that Karl is. There's going to set a screen to go there. What you can do with that, I think, every time, and again, so as to try and keep Karl by the dunker spot to be that secondary defender, is to switch that every single time.
Have Karl be in the corner. Exactly.
Karl in the corner and switching it with Mike. You want Karl on the strong side all the time. If they're going to be switching that, like if they're going to be running a screen there, switch it. Karl does not need to be running around chasing that screen. It's unnecessary. We saw Mike doing that last year. I think that is just a pretty simple accommodation you can put in there in straight high pick and roll. The difference that you bring up Naz, and I think that's where they distinguish a difference between the two. I was going through from Naz week, right? Watching some of those defensive clips. They let Naz just go, and Naz was the chaser. That was the difference between Cat and Naz. They switched it with Mike, with Karl, and often just let Naz.
And some of that is because Karl is so much better on the block than Naz.
And I think particularly then at that time in March, Karl's had literally just come back from it. Naz was in really game shape. They trusted Naz's ability.
And Naz is faster. I mean, the problem is, I mean, I actually think that makes sense to me. I think it's more a matter of if you put Naz on a wing in the corner, that's not necessarily great. That feels like a foul to me. And so I just feel like Cat is a better inside the perimeter. I think Karl is obviously a better defender in my opinion.
I got a good example of this. So this is Naz just guarding Saddiq Bey, straight, stretch 4,
right?
Who's looking to shoot here, and Naz struggles to guard this here.
Right.
Kind of, he's leaning towards the lane, and eventually here Bey is going to rise up and go at him, step back, and hit a 3 on Naz here. The next possession, though, Naz is guarding a traditional 4 in John Collins right here, and it's just straight high pick and roll. Naz is up in coverage in the high wall and recovers back. This might be his best defensive possession of the entire season right there. That's what Naz is good at defensively.
That's because Naz has had a lot of practice in the high wall, showing and reverting.
Yeah.
And he can play pick and roll that way. It's the same. Naz, I think, is good at yo-yoing from perimeter to inside.
Uh-oh, come back to me, Britt. Mark that down. Uh-oh, did we lose you?
Are
you back?
Can you hear me? Yeah, I'm back.
It's cut out for a second.
All right. I saw the circles.
No, you're good. Keep going.
All right, good. So essentially all I'm saying is I agree with you that if you can yo-yo Naz, then he is better in space than Cat is, certainly. And also that is the way Finch concedes that he just hasn't been worked enough as a low post defender. He just is raw.
I'm not worried about that. I'm really not worried about Naz defending in the low post because he's going to play the 4 this year. Okay, if John Collins in that situation wants to post him up, okay. Also,
John Collins is probably the perfect guy to be because he's not a great athlete himself and likes to pop. So, Naz can defend poppers.
Do you remember the Phoenix game where Naz broke his wrist? Right? Remember that game?
Yeah.
You know who's guarding in that game in the fourth quarter? Primary matchup? Kevin Durant.
Uh-huh.
And again, I say this to mean I think they view Naz at the 4 and who he's guarding as in a different way, or at least last season they did than Cat. And I think that is a distinction to be made in this whole bigs thing. And I wonder if Karl, the calf's in better shape, whatever, like maybe they do send him out to chase and guard a little bit more. Last year, they wanted to do that interchange with Mike. Like, let's keep Karl down here. Let's keep Karl down here. That's not how they had Naz do it, which I didn't really realize that until this morning when I was.
Yeah, and that's actually a really good point because you're doing what they did with D'Lo and high wall. You're lessening what he does badly and you're emphasizing what he does well.
Sure.
So that, I agree with that. And they would be smart to do that. I think Finch does realize that there will be 2 bigs on 2 bigs sometimes this year. And that Naz will be posted up.
It's hard. It's gonna be hard, man. I mean, it's what's necessary. And I think it's something that you naturally learn.
Right. I mean, can you see LeBron posting up Naz? I mean, that's a foul-out situation if I've ever thought of one,
I just, particularly when he's at the 4, like you get out those matchups where you're against Valanciunas, you're against those type of guys. Like, I think the post-up defense he needs to be worried about this season is guarding Kevin Durant, guarding DeMar DeRozan. When those guys are at the 4, and it's like you're guarding post-up for jump shot defense. He's going to get that's not a strength of his is low post defense. It's not, and he fouls too much. I just think that is one actual positive for him of switching to the 4 versus the 5 is I'm not saying he's some elite perimeter defender, but I think he's probably better there than he is.
And he has a lot of confidence in himself right now. I mean, I don't know if that will get eroded as the season goes on, but I think having a contract and I mean, I was struck by Naz on media day, just basically regarding himself as he just walked into the room like a top 8 player, without anything left to prove. I'm there. I got my deal. Let's see how they play me, but I'm ready to play however they want me to play. There was definitely a different feel to Naz, and that could go 2 ways. But if it goes the right way, that'll be a real plus for the Wolves. If he can, this is a 3rd straight guy we've talked about where mentally, if he's right, then things are a lot better. And that's what happens when you're dealing with guys who have some redundancy just by the nature of how tall they are in their game. There's going to be some improvisation that is going to partly be spontaneous and partly structured, but it is going to involve challenges to what that player themselves may think is better or worse for them. And their mental ability to acknowledge and dig in to a challenge will be incredibly important, I think, for this team.
Let's play your questions to Karl at Media Day, so as to talk about his offense.
On defense,
Okay.
What are the ways that you needed to adjust most last year in your brief time and then this year coming up? And then offensively, was it hard to basically not have that squaring up on the center and taking people to the rim as naturally as you did last year? I mean, the year before.
Yeah, I mean, just defensively, just ask to do more perimeter defense, run around screens, get around and stuff like that. Some things I'm confident and know I could do. So just doing whatever it takes to be effective for this team. And offensively, I feel I work hard enough on my game, and I have the ability to be able to do that against anybody. So just great thing about playing with the DR team, find more ways to be effective in those situations.
What aspect, as you look at this team and you've talked to Finchie about planning, what are you most excited about in terms of your contribution to this team coming forward?
Just take my World Cup experience and bring it to the team and utilize it to be effective for this team. So just taking that experience, that wisdom, that experience, and then utilizing it.
So, Britt, I take two things from that answer stick out to me. Kind of skip over the defensive one. I feel like we got that. The faith in his ability to be able to do his thing offensively versus whoever's guarding him, which is the way of saying, if I'm being guarded by a 4, I believe I can still do the same things I did against a 5, right? That's what he's saying there. The more interesting one to me, and the potentially more profitable one, I believe, is that taking the DR experience,
which was gunning from 3.
And it was that, and it's like, did you watch any of those like full games, or you just see clips of that?
I saw like a half. I can't remember. It might have been the opener against Puerto Rico.
Okay, so it was the gun, and I don't say that to mean like the gunning wasn't indicative of what it was. Like he was spacing the floor, he was shooting deep threes, it was all that. But it was this like they played him as a 4, and they had like a 6. They had a couple like 5s that weren't that big, but like offensively, it was just a structured offense of space, and the reason it was that way is because they just had Karl on the perimeter all the time, and sometimes it was to drive, but it was the post ups were really rare. It was a spaced structure, and I think and I don't know, I think some of what Karl's saying there is I really enjoyed my experience playing with the DR. I want to have fun again. I want to do all that, but from a literal like X's and O's standpoint, if he's talking about that, and if he can duplicate that, I think that is going to be wildly helpful for this team in shooting more threes, shooting them from deeper, which creates more space, and just generally having a structure of space. He was always one pass away from the primary action. And I think like picturing that in the Wolves context, it's, man, if Karl can always be one pass away from an Ant Rudy pick and roll or Ant whatever isolation action, space to the perimeter, that is going to do a world of good. So when I hear taking the DR experience from a basketball standpoint, like I believe if he did that, or they allowed that here, that would make a pretty significant difference for what this offense is.
I agree. I think that John Krasinski's column about there's no question about whose team it is. It's everybody's team, Ant and Cat, kumbaya. Aside, I think Cat was unquestionably the man in DR. And so he could do whatever he wanted. And I also think that what the DR wanted him to do was shoot from 3, which I think was smart because they were underdogs, obviously. They were the less talented team. So why not have your best player, who's a career 40% shooter, try to win you games from deep? I mean, that all makes sense.
And it worked.
It was a mixture of an alpha guy being used in an alpha way, I am not sure if, I feel like if in fact, I'm of the belief that if Cat averages 7 or 8 threes a game, that the Wolves have a better offense than if he averages 4 or 5. That's just, I've always felt that way for about, last 4 or 5 years anyway. And Finch speaks out of both sides of his mouth on that. Sometimes he talks about Karl needs to get better. Karl needs to look for the 3 more, but he also continually emphasizes that Cat off the dribble, that's what his real jam is. When Finch talks about Cat, he loves the idea of Cat being a guy who punishes people off the dribble. And as great as that is, and he's very good at it, he's become very good at it, especially from his left side, which is his quote unquote weak side, you would imagine, but it's not. Even when he doesn't switch and when he has to switch hands.
It's kind of like as a righty shooter, when you have your left pivot foot set, because that's where you're going to be bringing your right foot in to shoot. It's like that is a strength to be able to go to left because you're swinging your body that way to be able to.
Exactly. And he is fast at it, and he has perfected that banker, or at the very least drawing fouls off that banker. But again, if Cat can be shooting 3.8 of 8, almost 50% from 3, which, or make, or 3 from 8. Let's say what's 3 from 8? Probably not enough.
37 and a half.
Yeah. Okay. Point being, if he can be hovering around 40 on volume 3-point shooting, and that is a workable part of the offense, then what is going to happen is some things are going to have to go less. And one of those things is going to be him off the dribble. Another one is going to be some of those Rudy actions we were talking about before. And, some of it is going to be Mike Conley as a ball handler, all these things. I keep thinking about usage and talent, and it's a great problem to have. But, that there is going to be chatter during the season about Ant not getting enough burn in the offense if the offense isn't going well and Ant isn't the clear alpha. That's going to happen. And so
let me pop in right here quickly, because what I was thinking about before when you said Cat was the primary guy in the DR, right? And the team in Karl's career that he's been most the guy was the 2019-20 season. It was the first Rosas season. Saunders was the head coach, and that's when Karl shot the most threes. It was his one season where it was over 8. I think it was 7.9 threes per game. That's when he's, of his whole career, that's when he shot the most, when he was the most the dude. Can he take the ethos of that and plug it into a co-ownership with Ant? So Karl's feeling that, and Ant and the whatever dialogue you're talking about of Ant not getting enough burn. That's the conflict. Those things, Karl has never been enough of that while with another good player, whether it be Ant or Jimmy or Wiggins, whenever that was the number 2 guy.
Exactly. Yes, I think that is an excellent point. But then that's what I mean. Okay, that's actually what I would prefer. That's my particular preference.
Oh yeah, that's the drink. That's
okay, but that's when I say the usage of Rudy Gobert plummets.
Yeah,
in that plummets. And how is Rudy Gobert going to feel about all that? You're asking him to stay down by the dunker slot, and meanwhile he's patiently waiting to get putbacks and seeing these caroms go out into the foul line because Cat missed a 3 or whatever. I am not trying to be a pessimist. What I am trying to do in my own mind is cool my jets on. I have no doubt about the volume of talent offensively that the Wolves can put on the floor. I do have doubt about the synchronization of it in a manner that keeps everybody happy. and flows from structure and from a defensive-oriented team that Finch is claiming they're going to be this year. What that means is that they're not going to be a top 5 offense. They are going to be, hopefully, I think the template is a top 5 to 10 defense and hovering around a top 10 offense if everything goes well. I think that's the plan.
I mean, then that would be a major jump from last season. They were 23rd. It
would be a major jump.
And I know Karl's back in the mix, but
no, I agree.
Weren't just a Karl in the mix away from being even an average offense last season.
But there were ways. I mean, if you learn how to play better transition defense, you can hit the glass better. If you don't have as many turnovers because you've got a little more structure, if you are not basically force-feeding Rudy in places that he has no business being because you want to try to see what kind of game he has. And, if you don't have Austin Rivers and Jalen Noel and, so I'm not saying that they will be a top 10 offense. I am saying that if you have Ant and Cat going at 80% of their efficiency, that you've got really nice foundation for some good things. Go ahead.
There's from a macro perspective, right? There's fat to be trimmed everywhere. We just talk about some of the players that were playing the transition defense, all that sort of stuff. The micro fat trimming specific to Karl that's what's really interesting to me. To be the team that they want to be, the macro fat trimming has to happen. The micro one is going to be the key that turns the lock. And that's Karl's ability to distinguish who he's on the floor with offensively. Okay, Rudy's out here. This is not going to be as much of my pump and go attack the basket game because Rudy's going to be lurking in the dunker. Okay, Rudy's subbed out. I'm out here with Naz. I'm out here with Kyle. This is my time to be able to do that. What do we need now from me in these Rudy minutes? Because I'm going to be doing a little bit less. Is this a time when I'm in the corner a little bit more? Is this where I'm putting a little bit more juice into getting back in transition defense?
Right.
It is going, for Karl to work, it is going to be a constant think.
You were talking about Karl's court IQ. And I think that is an excellent.
It's the pivot point.
It's an X factor. Yeah. It's definitely an X factor. And he's in year 9. I think it's year 9, isn't it? And so I would love to see it. And I would love to see the freedom to do it without overdoing it.
You don't believe it's going to happen?
I don't. No. I
don't. Okay, I'll take that. I don't think it's going to happen.
There is a part of me that thinks
it's such a hard thing. This is such a hard thing. This isn't saying Cat that.
It's also a hard thing to predict, quite frankly, because I mean,
I'm not saying it can't happen. I'm just saying that what is the likelihood of ironing out all of those sort of things and getting them to click together? That's tough.
I mean, I am going to go super macro again, unfortunately, but this is not an organically built team.
Sure.
It is not. It's not a super team, but it is. You have still a lot of fallout from adding a mismatched piece who doesn't flex very much, has very, very specific skills at both ends of the floor and very, very specific limitations. I wouldn't even call them weaknesses because they shouldn't be invoked.
Which demands that Karl then has to be the flexible one, or Ant does. And Ant, as a younger player, we don't know to what degree he's going to be willing or capable to do that flex. It's why so much of it falls on Cat, because he is capable and, in theory, mature enough to be able to do it, or the most likely of the group to be able to do so.
Well, and again, you do have to. This is when whenever I begin to despair in the directions we're talking about, I say we have Mike Conley on our roster.
Yeah.
He's in that locker room all the time.
Great point.
And he is a, he's a sensei. He is a guy. He's a wise man, and Ant listens to him. We didn't get to see Cat and Mike Conley interact a lot in the locker room because Cat was hurt. But I just hope that there are so many. It's such an interesting season this year because
I know
the Wolves have. It's like a fan dance. The Wolves have teased, in so many different ways. But some of it is just pure deception, and some of it is a tease of something really, really good that is going to come to fruition if they keep working on it. Meanwhile, you've got a Western Conference that's just nuts in terms of like almost all the teams are like this, where you can see if the Lakers put it all together, if the Suns put it all together, if the Thunder put it all together, if the Pels put it all together, if the Clippers put it all together, those are vastly different scenarios, and none of them have really put it all together.
Right.
But like the Wolves, arguments can be made as to how they do it.
Right. So
that, let's say the Wolves put it all together, but let's say 5 or 4 of the 5 teams I just mentioned, they also put it all together. So it's
can't think about that though. I mean, you just gotta if you're them,
you can't think about it in terms of like, what do you think how are the Wolves going to do this year? Well, that's such a complex, multifaceted question.
That's why my question isn't how are the Wolves going to do. My question is what are the Wolves going to do? And then we will figure out through that how good or bad that they can be as in that time we figure out the Western Conference.
And I think the Wolves are going to, by default, emphasize Ant a lot on offense because that is the eventual path to getting to a summit if they get anywhere. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, they need to be able to do that without wrecking the supposed template of this big man deal, and making sure that Jared McDaniels stays a good soldier, Mike Conley doesn't get hurt, and everybody sinks. As an SYNCH.
We talked about Naz a little bit, but I just did have one question that I wanted to ask. Which of the two bigs, Cat or Rudy, do you think will Naz's better minutes come next to?
Neither one, quite frankly, but I would say of the two.
It's gotta be one of the two. Yeah, okay.
Well, I mean, I want to hair on fire lineups is where Naz is at his best. I mean, that just is. There is just no question of that. But I would say. On defense, Rudy. On offense, Cat. I know that's a huge cop-out. But, I mean, but it is. It depends on what you want. It all depends on what you want on a Naz. I would say on balance, I would play him with Rudy more than I play him with Cat.
Okay, interesting. I thought you were going to go the other way. I was, again, looking at some of this stuff this morning, just going through the clips again of those 4 games. I got to the point in my head where I think the Naz next to Cat one is best, and this next possession right here. Look how much Rudy helps Naz when Naz is exposed as a 4 on the drive. He's gonna get here we go. It switched on to here he's on Jordan Poole, right? And so those are gonna be things he's gonna be asked to do at the 4. Sorry, this next possession is the one where Rudy saves his ass.
Okay.
Naz hits the corner 3 there. He's coming down, and he's on the 4. He's on Anthony Lamb, who takes him off the dribble here. Look at what Rudy does there, man. Like that is what they need Rudy to do for Karl too. But when Naz is playing with his hair caught on fire, he's going to get burnt a lot, and Rudy has to be that rim protector.
And that's why I do think that it is Naz and Rudy is a better fit. That's what I said. You knew that, right?
Yeah.
Okay,
I did. No,
okay.
I was agreeing with you. And
Right.
it's like kind of one of those, the inverted version of that is I think it's going to really help Karl to play a good chunk of minutes at the 5 by himself almost, or with Kyle. That's where he can
I think
get his
both
offensive
Cat and
game.
Naz are better in fluid 5s.
Yeah.
But
I think they'd both be better as 5s, but they're
all
not
that said,
going to
all
play
that said, right? Yeah, and so, I mean, I can throw out. This is, I don't know if this is the right time. I guess we're a ways in, but there is a definite possibility that there is friction between who gets minutes at the 4 in certain important times of the game. Sure. And I think it's going to be slow-mo more than people think. I think what's going to happen is decision-making is going to be very, very important to this team. I think if you have Kyle Anderson and Mike Conley on the floor at the same time late in games, you are going to be in really good shape. But defensively, I think if you have Cat, Rudy, Kyle Anderson, and Mike Conley on the floor all at the same time, that is going to be harder. So again, it's tough. What I'm saying is I think for a variety of reasons, and maybe injuries and foul trouble and the usual assortment of noise that happens in the course of any season, will make this easy and it'll either make it moot or make it obvious. But Kyle Anderson will be running the offense from the 4 position in important moments more than we have been told it will happen, simply because it is Finch's ace in the hole, and games matter, and
particularly earlier on in the season when you're trying to minimize mistakes and have
and you
structure
need Rudy on that floor to play defense, and therefore and how often does slow-mo get Rudy the ball on offense at crunch time in important moments because other players are magnetizing defenses, and you have a single matchup on Rudy, and Kyle can get him that ball on a single matchup in a way that finishes clean, as we talked about. Mike Conley can do that, but that is more obvious. Slow-mo remains kind of like, what will he do next? Whereas Conley always does the obvious thing. Slow-mo is busy doing his own little deal. He's more, in some ways it's weird, he's a more creative playmaker than Conley, as good as Conley is.
It's interesting. I mean, we left Kyle's presence out of the bigs when I think he, like, at least half of his minutes are going to be at power forward for a lot of the reasons you just listed off there. But I say that to mean that these next 2 guys, this is like 5 total minutes on Luka Garza and Leonard Miller. This is why they are so far out of the rotation, is that you have, the 30 plus for Rudy, the 30 plus for Cat, Naz, presumably you want around 20, I don't know, 18. There's just not going to be bearing that chaos and those injuries be the only way that, Leonard Miller or Luka Garza get into the mix at all this season. I do think, though, if there is like some sort of injury, it doesn't really matter if it's Cat or if it's Rudy or if it's Naz, whoever gets hurt. Like, you could just plug Luka or Leonard Miller in, because there is so much just how this team is set up, the malleability of the 4-5s, which is all a long way of saying, do you think that Luka Garza or Leonard Miller would be the 5th big in this team's pecking order?
Garza. I think you have an assembly line. It's crazy. It's an assembly line of classic centers turning into crazy stretch 4s in 3 different flavors. It's like M&M's. It's the same candy, but they have a little bit different coloring, in terms of, like, one's green, one's red, and one's brown or whatever. But the point being, Luka Garza does things, and you can just tell by, his media day appearance. He's one of those guys that you could talk to for an hour pretty easily, and he's an open book and has a pure heart about it. He's going to tell you what's on his mind, and he's not dumb. He is somebody who understands his limitations in the game and has worked on them. When Tim Connolly talks about the right kind of individual to be in a locker room or on a team and everything, he's a heck of a guy to have as your 13th man or whatever. And Miller, obviously, same way, although a lot less refined. All right, yeah, he's still really a kid,
That's the thing is he doesn't. I think Leonard Miller doesn't have as good of an idea of what he's bad at right now as Luka Garza does.
And also, to be honest with you, I think he's best as a small ball 4. And they're not going to play a lot of small ball with Leonard Miller, I don't think, because I don't think he's fast enough. I mean, Minot and that point guard in Summer League, not Wendell Moore, but the other, the guy who was playing point guard for them. I can't remember who it was.
Did you just get like a raindrop on your
I probably spat on the screen.
Rub your camera. You're a little blurry.
I have no. Oh, it's up here.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There we go.
I probably spat on it.
That's all right. Yeah. I mean, just the way I've kind of viewed Miller is like the next iteration of this team. A couple years down the road, in the the Jaden Ant window, right? That's kind of where 19-year-old Leonard Miller comes into the mix. I'd be surprised.
It was best player available. I really do think that
they traded up for it. Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, they know he's an asset. I don't know where he fits on this. Like I said, I mean, power forward is such a weirdly stacked position on this team. I mean, you literally have 5 guys who could claim minutes at the 4. Actually, if you think of
Minot, I put I had to put Minot with the wings.
Yeah, you might have like almost half the team as power forwards.
It's crazy.
Yeah. Well, anyway, but I think Luka Garza and Josh Minot do have one thing in common, which is that they have spurt ability. They have the ability, if they go into the game, there's a chance that they may give you like a 6-point run somehow. With Minot, I think it's both ends of the ball. With Garza, I think it's mostly on offense. But and I
think Leonard Miller will be that way.
Well, I mean, I think
offensively, probably more so.
He's not a silky player, and so it's harder to appreciate. I appreciate Miller a lot more when I see him rebounding than almost anything else, because he does get to balls that Finch talks about 50-50 balls. He can get to those pretty well as going up on the glass against bigger guys and getting rebounds. And that's a nice skill to have. And I think he can build out other aspects of his game. He has a relatively good 3-point percentage, but I think that mechanics on that are just awful.
I think to the silky point, I think like the dream, right? The dream archetype for Leonard Miller is another very good but not silky player, Pascal Siakam. Like,
oh yeah, boy,
obviously
that's pretty cool. But I mean, But isn't Siakam like 6'11"?
I bet. I mean, like Leonard Miller's up there too.
High?
Yeah, I bet you they're. I mean, Miller's
okay. Well, fair enough, and he may grow an inch or two. So
sure,
he's only 19, right?
But it is kind of the. Yeah, it's not the and Siakam shoots threes now, but you're not like that's a dead eye shoot or anything. It's kind of the spread floor. Like, let me try and get downhill. I think that is whenever the first time we see Leonard Miller in a role or something, when it's working, he's really, with his size and a little bit of handle, able to take his man off the bounce, get to the basket, get fouled, maybe find a drop off pass. Like, I think that's eventually what it is. It's never going to be, I don't think he was drafted to be a super structured, clean
Right.
role.
And on
player.
this team, he will be the Nate Knight.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
He will be the
That's
guy
an upgrade.
yeah. Well, I mean, we hope so. I mean,
I would
we'll see.
assume so.
Yeah.
You did love multiple.
I like Nate Knight more than
shout-outs.
you did. Right.
I like Nate the guy a lot. We just never really. I mean, we still didn't really get to see him that. We saw a couple COVID flashes and that sort of thing. But
what
doing
you
the Miller
could rely
stuff,
on with Nate Knight, and we don't need to spend any more time on him after this, but whistles would happen at both ends of the floor. The guy knew how to foul, and he knew how to draw fouls.
That's true. That's
true. You might as well pack a lunch if you're going to watch Nate Knight play a half.
And that is there's something similar to that. I think. I mean, I don't know Leonard Miller's game that well yet, but Minot's got, I think, has some of that.
But in a very different way.
Yeah. That's true. But it's a tough spot, and I mean, we'll talk about Minot next time. But yeah, there's a lot of like fours on this team, and no direct path to those minutes, coming anytime soon. And that's why we're doing this over an hour into the episode. I mean, this is in the weeds and such, but it's not going to be a situation, I think, where this season where Leonard Miller gets much opportunity, or even Luka Garza, who we're both putting in the pecking order ahead of him. It's just they got a lot of other ways to handle the bigs without getting to the fifth or sixth.
What would be crazy is if they sent both Garza and Miller down to Iowa and they go like 35-2, which is entirely possible. I mean, they clearly are quad A, to use the baseball term, not quite good enough to get NBA minutes on a regular basis, probably, certainly not on this team. But if
I would say certainly not this team. I think, and this is kind of a guess, but I think Luka has evolved into being a
rotation player.
No, like a bad team's rotation player, so if he's in, ironically, Detroit, I think, who drafted him, I guess they have a million bigs too, but that level of team.
No, I get it.
Maybe he could, I think he's like a 10th, 11th player on a.
And do you think that his new sculpted body makes him more desirable as a big or less desirable in the overall NBA?
I think it's good for him. I still think he's going to have his force. And even if by losing some weight, he loses 2% of that force, he had that. If there's one thing he has in spades, it's the ability to move people under the basket, whether that's in post-ups or offensive rebound situations. I mean, the body change stuff is just going to help him in the two areas where he is nowhere near an NBA player, which is running in transition offensively or defensively and guarding and pick and roll. The only way to start, I just have like one Luka Garza image in my mind from, I think it was the day of the trade deadline. A bunch of guys had to play. It was in Denver, and Jokic just burnt him up the floor running in transition. And Luka just needed to lose weight or gain more speed to be able to do that. And to be a third, fourth big on a team in the NBA, he needs to have an ability to not be completely cooked defensively in pick and roll. And we do know that those are the things, and he's told us, I think, talking to coaches and other people around, he knows that. And those are the things that he is focused on trying to develop. Is he ever going to be able to do that? I don't know, but like cutting your body fat in half is a good place to start.
Another Leonard Miller comp might be Paul Reed of Philadelphia.
I kind of like that. Yeah.
I mean, as somebody, I'm thinking now about, you talked about backup fives, and that was like a guy I thought of when you were talking about backup fives.
I think I said this after the draft and after watching some of that G League Ignite stuff. I think that's Leonard Miller's position. That's what I would have drafted him to be as a.
I know. I didn't say that because it's so out of the question on this team, but I do agree that there are certain, creative. I can see OKC plugging him as a backup five right now.
Oh, for sure. Like I just like broadly for young 6'10" guys. Right. I think that's a great place to start, is as a small ball five. See if you can develop some floor game, a shot, like then maybe you can play the four. It's going to be, I don't know. That opportunity doesn't exist here, but we'll get to see him probably play some here in the preseason. And then, like you said, in Iowa too. All right, Britt, we spent most of the time on Rudy, Cat, and Naz, but I
As
think
we should.
those are the main guys to do. This was fun. We'll come back next week. Let's try and think of off the top of our head who the wings are. I wrote it down in my messages to you.
Well, certainly Ant and Jaden.
No, I think I put Ant as a guard.
Oh, did you? Okay, that's interesting.
I had to bounce out. Okay, here I wrote it the message to you. Wings: McDaniels, Anderson, Troy Brown Jr., Josh Minot, Matt Ryan, Jalen Clark for 6 wings, and then the guards: Conley, Edwards, McLaughlin, Milton, Alexander Walker, Moore Jr. I don't know.
Okay.
It's all interchangeable. It was mostly about splitting it up.
And also, we threw in slow-mo here a little bit. Ant will go into the wings discussion simply because he will be guarded by a wing, no doubt.
Yep.
If a guard guards Ant, everybody salivates, right? I mean, so, I mean, the guy is a bowling ball when he wants to be. But I get your point. And one of the beauties of what Finch naturally likes the idea of positionless basketball, which again is what makes this reliance on the bigs such a weird deal. But there you go. All these things that I hope that just selfishly, is a team I cover. I want to see. I want to see what their areas of optimism that are not my areas of optimism. I want to see what the basis of that is.
Yeah.
I have always been comfortable being more down on the Wolves than the organization is, because I've covered a lot of bad teams and a lot of bullshit about rebuilds. This is a little different because there's a lot of talent here. I am more down on the team getting the right schemes to get everything done. But even that said, I can talk myself into some enthusiasm.
Sure.
Macro, when we get down to that micro, how does this guy adjust? How does this guy give himself over to the team? Is there accountability? Is there a consistency? Will they get back on defense all the time? Will they play off-ball defense? Will they leave everything up to Rudy, which therefore gives Rudy more of a cudgel to be the kind of team he wants it to be? There's all these dynamics that those are the things that make me want to just flip a coin when I think about predictions. A lot depends on.
This is the way I'm thinking about it, man. It's like, okay, let's say, again, this is way overly simplified. Let's say there's a 60% chance this whole experiment doesn't work, right?
Yes.
That means there's still a 40% chance it works.
Right.
And I feel, for me, and I feel like this was natural given it was the first year of it last year, we spent a ton of time talking about what didn't work. That's 60%, right?
Right.
And I'm not saying we ignore those things this season, but what I'm going to be drilling in on, particularly in the preseason, training camp, and the beginning of the season, is what is that 40% of it, of the ways in which it does work, and how do they highlight that to bump it up higher? So maybe it isn't 40%.
I think that's an excellent attitude. That's actually a good prescription for me, because I keep going either or, which you can fudge yourself to death on this stuff.
Well, it's just like, I think for the both of us, at least, we're pretty well on the record of what we think is going to be hard to make work, or just straight up didn't work last year. So it's like,
so what will work, right? And it is, some things will definitely work because that will complicate the things that don't work. I mean, it isn't like it's almost like if you have 5 really strong flavors and you're trying to make a drink.
Okay.
How does it taste? And a lot of it has to do with how can you make that the best tasting drink? Yeah. And there's a lot of ability to overdo it, and there's a lot of ability to overreact to a small sample.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we got some really smart people who have a lot on the line to justify what happened a year ago. So I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be a fascinating season. And to be honest with you, I'm glad that I don't have a great fix on it or don't have a clue necessarily what exactly will happen. I've got doubts and I've got faith in different aspects of it. But I do think that it's a unique season because
That's why we got to see it. That's why we got to see it.
Absolutely. And Finch has got to see it.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And hopefully Tim has got to see it. Tim Conley.
Yeah. Well, coming. I mean, before the next time we record, they will play 2 preseason games. I don't know
That's
how much
right.
that counts.
Yeah. Out in the desert.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I don't know if it counts as really seeing it. And I don't want to overreact.
United Arab Emirates against a Dallas team that they really won't prepare for because it's so idiosyncratic. But that's all right, you know.
It's
because Dallas will be working on their stuff too. They'll be trying to get the Luka Kyrie thing going.
Oh, for sure.
You know.
Yeah, and it's just a general feel. Right. You know, what did it feel like when it was out there? And we'll be able to see what they were targeting, you know, and I think, again, not something to overreact to, but I'm interested to see it. So we'll come back next week. We'll talk about that a little bit within the context of talking about Jaden McDaniels and the Wings and all of that sort of stuff. Maybe he'll have a contract extension by then. Saw Devin Vassell signed yesterday. Jason and I might talk about that a little bit tomorrow, but I think there's ample things to dig into with the Wings as well next week. So we'll do that with Britt. In the meantime, I'm sure I'll be firing off some tweets, some X's over at x.com. You can follow him there at Britt Robson. Once you start writing columns again, obviously those are going to be up at MinnPost. Appreciate you doing it, Britt.
My pleasure.
All right. Until next time, he's Britt. I'm Dane at DaneMooreNBA. I'll be back on Wednesday morning with Jace Frederick. Until then, peace out.